Eric Burgess here with Music Marketing TV. Today we're going to be looking at 3 uses for the plugin Spaced Out by Baby Audio. Let's dive right into it. So our first use here is the most straightforward one, the one most people are typically going to be using this for, and that is to just straight up add space. Basically act like a reverb. A really fancy reverb that's got a bunch of extra bells and whistles along with it. So in this case, I've got here this bell sound in particular. And if we were to bypass this is what it sounds like bypassed. Got some higher notes over here, so maybe we hear some chords. If we just turn this on. So this right now is on the second preset, but there's a bunch of extra things I like to do with Spaced Out. Specifically, it has a random feature. This feature is insanely useful. It almost negates the need for presets because basically it'll just randomize things. And this is a plugin that really benefits from randomization because pretty much any combination is going to be interesting. And what I would do is I'd move this guy around to try out the different mixes you can get. Because if you move more like over here, so if we go ahead, let's do another randomizer. And then that's our dry signal. I mean, that's by far the most common thing I'm doing with it. So that's our first use case. Just use the generate. It's great because you can view it as just sort of random colors that come out and you can just keep going until you get something you like. And it's not random in a way that it takes a long time to get something you like. Generally, you'll find something in usually the first 5 or so presses of the button, which is why I really like it. So that's our first case. Our next case has to go with the bass sound. So we're going to go ahead, delete the one we just added, put back the one we like. Okay, so there's this bass sound I have. It's over here. And it's got some automation and things going on at the time. Notice it sounds significantly different. So this is the next use case. It's kind of an extension of the first one. So here we've got Spaced Out doing its thing, and I am automating the wet dry. So it's going to be moving down into the dry territory. So if I start it, and it slowly comes out. And the dry version, if we go ahead and bypass this, is a very low, full forward thing. And I'm automating a couple other things on this particular synthesizer to open it up and make it sound a bit brighter. And so this is a great transitional element. And this is true for just reverbs in general, but because of the kind of spaces, Spaced Out tends to favor these big, lush kinds of spaces. And they've also got some filtering that I'm using here. You can see here there's a filter, there's a mellow is basically a filter. And by mixing these and then taking them off slowly, it creates the ability to just have something sort of come from the distance and grow as if it's getting closer to you. And so this plugin in particular excels at that. And so I'm just using the wet dry. But if we wanted to be fancier, we could actually keep this and make it a bit slower and open the filters and then bring forward the dry. And that could create a different sense because it would sound as if it was getting bigger and then it would sound like it gets closer. And so thered be like a different way of processing it rather than just a small thing growing towards you. It gets big first and then comes toward you. So there's another idea you could use with this, but a transitional element. If we listen to it as it goes, you see things are coming in. There's actually, there's a second synth line that comes in, which is why it suddenly gains a little bit more momentum. But that is the second use case. Just a little bit of automation along with just some paying attention to what your settings are, getting the kind of space you want to start out at, and looking at the possibility of automating filters can really go a long way towards making a sound that was originally very forward the entire time to sound like it's been integrated into the track. Our last example here is a mix of the two. Let me figure out which one I put it on. I can't remember. I believe it was on the chord sound, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, it was on the strings and on the bells. That's right. So if we come over here, I've got these bells and strings, and just for clarity, I'm going to throw a limiter at the end so we can hear a little more clearly what's going on. So we're going to have a big gain up just so we can hear what's happening though. So I have these sounds, and they've got these lovely bells. And these really nice sort of shimmery strings. And they have this like sort of shaky quality to them. So our last case is mixing two of them together. Now this is true for just plugins in general, but when it comes to spaced out, they've got a lot of color box effects, specifically in the textures and what you can do with the echoes. So there's this whole delay engine that sort of works with the reverb. So each one of these has different jobs. Notice that this one gets automated on over time. So let's see if we can't grab that. And I believe it's this one. Let's just turn these all on because they're all kind of doing, it's a very dynamic channel strip. They're all sort of turning on and off to make things work out. So those extra little shakes at the end, if we remove this one in particular. So this one, basically space. You see there's a couple delays, but mostly space-based. We're relying more heavily a bit on what's going on over here. This isn't like super crazy or sophisticated. Nothing's really happening. The filters are totally open. No real filtering is happening. So space-based. This one is texture-based. This one has a lot of mumbo jumbo going on over here. Not necessarily every little bit was intentional, a lot of just experimentation. And there is some filtering going on, as well as some distortion to an extent. And so this is causing that shaking quality that you're hearing before. Now with the limiter pushing it up very highly, it kind of changes its character a bit. But if we just turn on this one, we actually start with it totally off and then it comes on. Yeah, it's really pretty in context, even though typically you wouldn't associate that kind of a sound with a pretty sound in isolation. When it works with the progression and all the atmosphere that's going on, it just creates a really nice mood. So these are the settings. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot going on here as far as like me being like technically involved. I was just being interested in what would come out if I tried out different things here. So a lot of fiddling, nothing super like, oh, I'm going to do this or that. The next one is spaced out, and this one is just a spatial thing. I can't even remember. I think I just left it on clean start because I like how it sounds. I like the very first preset a lot. It's really, really spacious. And so if we were to take this one off and just hear this. So, you know, adds a nice space. If we take these off. That's what it would be like. So there'd be nothing basically in these holes in between. So when you put them together, this one is actually coming off while this one's turning on. So we get a more of a color texture kind of thing. And the space sort of, it's still there, but it backs off a bit to give a little bit more room for this. So we're mixing the two of them in a creative way, using two elements to create a really nice space. And that shaking that happens right there, if you can hear it clearly, the shaking up and down near the end is so dang cool. And it's almost like the distortion is a response to what's happening here. It's a really great way to use spatial effects and basically make the responses out of the echoes of the sounds themselves. So when we toss everything together, these three methods, so we've got our bells being affected, we've got our mixing together. There's a couple other instances of spaced out that are sort of variations on the same thinking. And another interesting process you might explore is using some sort of pitching effect. So I have it spaced out and then I pitch it down later, which I'm not gonna, well, I could show you this real quick, a little bonus round. So I have some choir sound and it sounds like this. And let me mute that. If I take this and turn this up, we want this up. It's being automated. And so if we were to go ahead and where is that automation at? It's down here. We're going to go ahead, take this, leave it at max. And that's with this spaced out. If we take this off, and this is being automated on to make it fade out as it gets higher. So it's sort of a contrasting. Typically you would do both at the same time, but I decided to juxtapose them. So now it would sound like this. And so, yeah. So with this automation back in, we sort of mix that out. And it creates a really, really nice transition. It's pretty subtle. You kind of have to have it pointed out. But once you hear it and you know it's there, it's just another one of those small supporting elements in the background. Kind of a nice way to mix some reverby space and add an extra little lower octave in what you're doing. So there's some different ideas for you. Let's go ahead. Let's listen to the whole thing uninterrupted so you can just sort of hear where all the pieces are. This track itself currently relies heavily on spaced out. It's on all the major elements, and I think it really just shines through. So let's just go ahead, let's give this a listen. So that's Spaced Out by Baby Audio. If you have any questions about any of the stuff you saw here, feel free to drop a comment down below, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.